Welcome to Scoop World Order. It is Monday afternoon. We have Marquise Lightfoot's commitment has just happened. He is committed to the Miami Hurricanes. Slight surprise there, not a total shock after some of the recent events that have happened over the last few hours. Again, we aren't going to get them all, but when you can get Dylan Stewart and Edric Houston, it's about as comfy of a landing as we could ever have because we have two five-star defensive ends projected to come to Ohio State. Along with Justin Scott, one of the most prolific defensive tackles in the country. 3 5-stars. Marquise Lightfoot, nice player, 4-star. He's easily 4 out of 4 out of that crew. So bon voyage and enjoy Miami. I hope he has a great career there. But we're really excited about the guys that we are getting. There's some more projections for commitment dates that are coming in, including Kingston. KVA is looking like he's coming in on the 23rd. So there's a lot of big stuff hopping on BuckeyeScoop.com. So as always, we're very thankful for you guys. We're grateful for you guys for tuning in. Board has been super active. Big boom yesterday with Justin Scott coming into the fold. That was a monster. Beat Georgia, beat Bama, beat everybody on that one, Miami. And so that was a huge boom for us. The Lightfoot thing's a slight setback, but given all the projections that are coming for Dylan Stewart, who I think is the best end in the country other than Edric Houston, who's also projected to Ohio State, I'm sleeping like a baby. I think this is a great class. I think we go get another project defensive end like a Booker Pickett, round this thing out, and away we go. And this will still end up being likely the best defensive line class that we've ever signed. So we're going to get into that. But as always, we're very thankful for you guys. If you guys enjoy this content, please click like. Click subscribe. We're racing to 20,000 subscribers on YouTube, so thank you. Also, if you enjoy the audio content, we are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Give us a follow on those as well. Those are huge for us, so thank you so much. If you enjoy our live content, click that little alert bell, and you'll get an alert every time we go live. And as always, shout out where you're from in the comments. And also comment, which recruit are you most excited about of all the recent buzz, all the upcoming commitments, seeing in an Ohio State uniform? Because for me, it's Edric Houston, Dylan Stewart. I love big-time defensive ends. I'm super excited about that. And I'm sleeping like a baby knowing those guys are projected to be Buckeyes. Going to bring in my good friend at Nevadabuck. Nevada, how are you?
I'm a sad panda today. I'm sad. I hate freaking missing. I hate when things change. I hate NIL. I do. I don't want to be the guy that complains about it. And I think Ohio State, a lot of times they get out recruited. A lot of times they get out hustled. A lot of times there's just a better connection with other guys. But this one was all NIL. With Scott going to Ohio State yesterday, it freed up some salary cap money, and basically Miami took that money and threw it at Lightfoot. And when the number came to Ohio State today, it was so big that Ohio State didn't really believe that it was a legitimate offer. They thought that they had a deal, with Lightfoot. They thought they'd had a commitment from Lightfoot. They thought they had an NIL package put together that was competitive, that really, kept him there. That was, sufficient enough for his spot on their class. And when the offer came in today, it was literally 4 times what they were offering. And they didn't think it was legitimate. I didn't think it was legitimate. I thought it was just kind of maybe pie in the sky. Maybe they're just taking a swing to try to increase the NIL deal. But apparently it was. And they went to Miami. And like I said, it's not sour grapes. I don't begrudge Miami anything. It's the way that the game's played right now in 2023. But I don't have to like it. And, like I said, we can't get them all. I'm excited about every commitment. I say that every time. This just opens the door for somebody else. But I thought this was one that we were going to get. And, I don't like being surprised, like this. But, it's so hard right now because things can change with one phone call in recruiting. It's never been that way before. It's never been, where things could change so dramatically, with NIL. Always before it was in the shadows. You had to handle it through a mentor or a church or through the back door, and those things were always kind of loosey-goosey. But now you can just call up and say, hey, here's the offer. And that's what happened today. Ohio State got beat on it. People have to remember Ohio State does not have an unlimited salary cap. They have a certain amount of money that they've got commitments from the collectives to spend on these kids. And when that money's gone, that's all they have. So it's not like they can just go, hey, let's just spend an extra million at this kid or an extra 500,000 at that kid or an extra 300,000. I mean, that's not the way that it works. They've only got a certain amount of money, and they did not have enough money to follow it on Lightfoot, and they ended up losing him. So sad Panda time, but oh well, chalk it up. On to the next one.
Yeah, I think that, I would really be hesitant to dive into Miami, given how big of a train wreck it's been, how bad they've been the last few years, how many coaches they've had. God bless them. If it's me, I know obviously I know you got the bag, but if I'm looking at the guys that are projected to go to Ohio State in Edric Houston and Dylan Stewart, and I'm the number 3 defensive end, I don't know if I want to fight that fight. When I could go to Miami, you get a lot of schools to be the number 1 guy, be the the guy that's going to be the freshman that plays in that whole dime. Because when you look at Dylan Stewart and Edric Houston, I mean, those are 2 legit 5-star superstar defensive ends. And again, I've seen his film. Nothing against Marquise Lightfoot. I'd have been excited if he'd been a Buckeye, but it ain't Dylan Scott excited. I'm just being honest. Not Edric Houston excited. I watched those guys' film. I was like, these are like like the Nick Bosa kind of films where they're just absolute monsters off the edge, guys that could be playing as freshmen and being impact guys as freshmen. So, again, you're not going to get them all. Does this open the door for Booker Pickett? Does it open the door for another kid? And again, it's hard for me to be sad when we got Justin Scott yesterday. So it's like, if you get, if you win the lot, you win the Powerball one day and then the next day, you get a flat tire. Like, it's hard to be too sad in my opinion, but that's just me. Like, I kind of take inventory of the good, and we got one of the best defensive tackles that we've gotten a commitment wise in 5-10 years. I mean, a 5-star number 1 overall kid that Georgia, Bama, we beat all those schools on him completely out of the blue. Nevada, you were on the road a little bit. What were your thoughts when we got Justin Scott out of Chicago from St. Ignatius Prep? I mean, just completely random. It was like a firework going off in the sky in the middle of the afternoon on Sunday. What were your thoughts when we got him?
Well, I think again, I think I was a little bit more optimistic than a lot of people, but yeah, I was caught off guard by the commitment for sure. I mean, just with guys like that, you're just never sure, where they're going to go. He played his commitment very close to the vest. Hadn't really put out a lot of vibes, not to anybody. And I can tell you, Ohio State was as surprised as anybody when they got the call on that. And that one, they're not surprised very often. They're usually at least have a pretty good handle on where things are at. But that was surprising to them as well. And when it's surprising to Ohio State, you don't mind being surprised as a person who follows Ohio State. So yeah, that was a nice way to kick off the Independence Day weekend on that Sunday, and just a huge get, as you said. Haven't had a defensive tackle like him in quite some time, at least coming out of high school.
Who do you compare him to? Like, I watched this kid, and he reminds me of Corey Simon, who played at Florida State. He is an upfield, disruptive, agile guy. A lot of guys that are this big, they're 315, 6'5", they can't move like this. And I know that's a cliche, but there's some guys genetically just have more twitch and more explosion. Most guys that are 6'5", 315 are plotters, slower guys, not twitched up. This guy is super twitchy. Even when you watch him play offensive guard, which he plays both ways for his high school, I mean, when he comes off the rock, I mean, he's got that snap that makes a first-round offensive lineman, a first-round guard, interior guy. And it's exciting to see that on the interior of the defense. He's kind of like Mike Hall, except he's 30 pounds heavier, which again is terrifying if you're an offensive lineman. But who does he remind you of?
Well, when I first saw him, I mean, I remember watching Warren Sapp in high school, and he reminds me of Sapp a lot in terms of, like you said, just the athleticism, just the explosion, just the way he kind of yeah, like I said, he does look like, you can tell he plays offense out there because he's so fluid. You can see him as a pulling guard, as one of those NFL guys that gets out there and runs right there with the running back. So now he's, like I said, he's super athletic. I think he could play on either side of the ball, but clearly, as a defensive tackle, so disruptive and such a problem as a matchup because as well as anybody, rushing the passer and defeating the offensive line is all about matchups, and that's why they move guys like Aaron Donald down to the inside or J.J. Watt down the inside to kind of get them out in their, up against guards or up against centers where they're not used to dealing with those pass rushing moves. And this is a guy that could play inside, he could play outside, he could play on the nose, could play anywhere. And like I said, just when I think about what Larry Johnson's going to be able to do with him, you get really excited because it's obvious he's got all these abundant physical gifts, and once they coach him up, well, sky's the limit for him.
It'll be interesting to see what Larry does with him. If he plays him as a nose guard, or if he plays him as a three technique. Plays a lot of nose in his high school tape. And, people generally think of a nose guard as like the bigger, heavier Gilbert Brown, big fat guy who like takes up two blockers because he's always basically double teamed on the outside shoulder of the center usually. And they think of the three technique as the more disruptive Warren Sapp, Aaron Donald type guy. But, something that's interesting with Larry is, he's played Mike Hall, who's a 285-pound kid at the nose, which again, traditionally you think of that lighter, quicker guy. He's playing three technique, getting upfield, disrupting. But, Mike Hall is really good at getting after the center, getting after his snap hand. Like that's one of his favorite moves is to go on the offhand, pin the elbow and rip through. And, Houston, Tom Herman did that with Houston with Ed Oliver. People were like, well, Ed Oliver should be a three technique, upfield disruptor, pass rusher, outside shoulder to the guard. And they played him at the one technique. And it's just kind of an interesting wrinkle that, frankly, I haven't really seen a lot of. Like most of the times when I look back at, when I played in my career, you always put the more athletic guy at the three technique and the bigger, heavier guy at the nose. The guy that has to take up two blockers all the time. And they've kind of flipped that a little bit. You think a guy like Ty Leak would be the nose and Mike Hall would be the three technique. So this guy's got the versatility to play both. Again, like his film is out of this world. So again, like I always take inventory of the good because getting a kid like this, Dylan Stewart, Edric Houston, that's 3 5-stars. I don't know the last time we've had 3 5-star defensive linemen in a class, especially 2 5-star ends in the same class. And then, again, when one kid leaves you at the altar like Marquise Lightfoot did, go get Booker Pickett. Like I love Booker Pickett's film. It's hard to really evaluate him because the competition is so poor that he goes against in Central Florida. But he's a big athletic dude. He's 6'5", lanky. He's a guy that I think has been a plan B guy because of the ascension of our chances of getting Edric Houston and Dylan Stewart. So, like again, I think when you get a franchise type defensive tackle, those guys are so rare, especially to get one, and he's a northern kid, he's a Chicago kid, because most of these kids are in Georgia and Texas and Florida and Louisiana and states where we have, it's more of a fist fight, it's more uphill climb to get them. But when you get a northern kid who's this big and athletic, it's exciting. It's really exciting. In Nevada, how do you see, we've got a ton of offensive commits. We've got 4 offensive linemen committed. What do you project over the next month? I know Kingston's going to commit on the 23rd. That's a guy that I know Ohio State loves internally. I've heard great things about Kingston. I'm actually going to click his film on real quick here. What do you think coming down the stretch before camp really starts over the next month? Aaron Scott, Kingston, how are you feeling about those guys?
Well, feeling good. Obviously, we've talked about Aaron Scott committing on his dad's birthday at the end of the month. All signs point to the Buckeyes. Kingston, Ohio State feels very confident that they're going to get Kingston. That's a guy that's a logical connection to Ohio State and another guy that they think they're going to get. But, just taking a step back from the individual recruits and just looking at between the guys that we have committed and the guys that we have potentially committed, and not saying that we get them all or that we have to run the table or draw the inside straight or something like that. But on paper, this could rival the greatest class that Ohio State's ever gotten in this history of Ohio State. So that's kind of the situation. That's kind of the rare error that we're in right now with this recruiting class is it's only a question of, is this the greatest recruiting class that Ohio State's got? Is it the second greatest? Is it the third greatest? But this is an all-time epic class for Ohio State. And No, not every kid's going to pan out. No, not every kid's going to turn out to be a superstar. But on paper, from a recruiting standpoint, from an average star set, as disappointing as today was with Lightfoot, this class is very likely to go down as the greatest, highest rated class that Ohio State's ever recruited. And to think that that happened in 2023 with NIL and with all the competition from all the different schools, that's pretty incredible. And so, as an Ohio State fan, you've got to be pleased. You've got to be pleased with the the overall. As while we can nitpick, hey, how do they do on this? How do they do on that? How do they got the staff organized? You can't nitpick with the results. They're not getting all these great kids by accident. Ohio State is a superior brand. Is putting out a great story. It's got a great history of getting guys in the league. It's got a great recent history of getting guys in the league, and they're getting kids to buy in and sign on the dotted line. So, just in general, it's great news. Is like I said, and I am disappointed by today. I'm disappointed by Lightfoot because I wanted him. But I've said this a million times. Any kid not named prior, comma Terrell, I'm not lining up on the ledge with, and we'll be fine. But it is disappointing. Not gonna diminish that fact. But this class is going to be one for the ages, and that's another fact.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that when you have, if you go to the modern recruiting era like 2002. It's probably the best class that Ohio State has had since there's been rankings, since Scout and Rivals and 247 have been a thing. You go back to the 02 class that had Maurice Claret and Justin Zwick, AJ Hawk, DeAndrea. That's probably the best class in Ohio State history in the modern era. Now we can go back to the super sophomores and the 68 guys and that kind of thing, and you can argue those guys, but that was pre-star rankings, pre-scholarship limits. So if you go modern era, we'll probably end up doing an episode that compares it to the 02 class. But real quick, PJ Studio, $20 super chat. Appreciate you, my friend. All of anytime you guys do a super chat, it's automatically answered on the chat. So if you guys ever have a question that you're dying to know the answer to, Nevada and I will get to this. So the question is, and I'm going to ask this to you, Nevada, and then I'll give my answer. With all of our recent recruiting successes, what's the most important target to land? Is it Bolden? Is it Baker? Is it Lambert? Is it Houston? I am scared to death of our offensive line depth, even with Kirk's reassurances that the unit will be fine. Nevada, what are your thoughts? KJ Bolden, Brandon Baker, Gerby Lambert, Edric Houston, all big-time guys, 2 offensive tackles, 1 big-time safety, 1 big-time end. What are your thoughts on them? And then your thoughts on the offensive line, which I think we talk about the offensive line more than any position, maybe every other position combined. We talk O-line play.
No, to me, again, for the record, I'm excited about every commitment. I'm excited about every kid. I think, you never know which ones are going to be the got that. I said for the record. Having said that, of the kids listed right there, to me, Houston's the most important. I think we're fine on the line. I'd like to get either one of the tackles, but I'm just not as concerned about that. So I'd probably go Houston, Bolden, and then the 2 tackles would be, it's a 1, 2, and then 3A, 3B. You can flop the tackles either way, but that's kind of the way it is for me. That's just my personal opinion. I know people have a different opinion on that, and they're entitled to it. But to me, Houston's a key guy. Again, I think we're getting him. Ohio State thinks we're getting him. Is that one going to be a battle, or is that one going to be a fight all the way to the very end? Of course it is. These things are never easy, and in the age of NIL, nothing is done until you get them signed. And even then, after you get them signed, it's not done because they can leave. So it's like, it's never been a more difficult time to kind of create your depth chart and figure out where you are as a team, as an organization. Looking out a year, looking out 2 years is kind of a fool's errand because your entire roster can change. Either for the good or for the bad. And for Ohio State, to me, a guy like Houston is just. Those are the difference makers. I think the difference makers positions in college football are defensive end, quarterback and wide receiver. I've always, I think wide receiver and quarterback are overpowered because I think the passing game is overpowered, and I think defensive ends are the guys that can, upset and disrupt the passing game, as much as anybody on the defensive side. So that's why I think that position is most important. Houston would be my number one pick.
I'm going to throw some KJ Bolden on just because I love watching his film. Yeah, for me, I'd probably go. Because I'm like, I'm not really worried about the offensive tackles as much as everybody else is. I'd go Houston for sure, Bolden, then Baker, then Lambert. I think that matches what you said. I just think Edric Houston is just an absolute monster difference maker. Can start as a day one freshman kind of guy. Love his film. Gets upfield, just pure effort, pure explosion. I think pulling a kid out of Buford, down the street from Athens, an hour away from Georgia, is a seismic move. I think, it really, you'd be pulling too, because KJ Bolden's probably 1A for me. KJ Bolden's a guy that, in the safety-driven defense, man, you get a kid like this, and this is the best. He could be the best player in the country. I mean, he's really, really good. Loves Ohio State, rocks a lot of Ohio State gear. I know there are a lot of kids like to do that and kind of play the game, but he's a different cat, man. The Buford kids like to go wherever they want to go. So, we get these two kids, and there's a lot of momentum for both of them to come to Ohio State. I'm good, and Brandon Baker, West Coast kid, again, it's Oregon and us, it looks like, coming down the stretch. So, again, that's going to be a battle, but I think that, if I look at the depth chart and I'm Brandon Baker, I'm coming to Ohio State. I've said that about a lot of these tackles. Gerby Lambert is just a different kid, real quiet kid. He's not as good as Nick Petit-Frere, but he's a lot like Nick Petit-Frere, doesn't talk much. Super academic kid, which again, that always worries me because a lot of those kids, they get obsessed with the Notre Dame thing or the Boston. If a kid's visiting Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Boston College, as soon as you throw in that Boston College visit, it raises an eyebrow to me because I'm like, well, does he really want to be like great at football, or is he just like a pure student? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's completely fine. That makes you, maybe it's something with the parents where they're like, oh, it's all about the value of the education. And to me, like when you're a young kid and you have a chance to make generational wealth in the NFL, I think you go after that. You can always go back and get your, like Anthony Gonzalez got his MBA at Stanford after he was done. He went to Ohio State first and, got his business degree, and then he went and got his MBA at Stanford afterwards. So it's like, like you can always, when you're done playing in the league, you can always go back and get, go to Harvard or go to Yale or whatever and get your graduate degree. But yeah, I think that, when you get those big time defensive ends, man, it just changes everything. It changes your whole defense. And again, I think that as much grief as guys like Lathan Ransom took and some of our guys in coverage took last year, our corners took for not getting any interceptions, I think a lot of it's because we didn't generate the pressure we need to generate. I mean, honestly, we had 30-ish sacks, and when you have two five-star defensive ends and Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, like those, and even Zach Harrison, you had 3 5-star defensive ends, and you only had 30 total sacks between the entire unit. It's not acceptable, and you got to have those pressure players up front that really stress out the defense. You look at what Georgia's defense has done. You look at where, obviously they've had fantastic secondary players, but you look at their front 4 guys that have gotten drafted. Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, the big kid, escaping my name, from went to Philly, won every award. You look at the number 1 overall pick who went to Jacksonville. It's that's what drives that's the engine. That's the heart of the entire team is that D line. And Georgia's was dominant the last 2 years, and that's why they have 2 national championships. It really is. So I put a lot of favor into getting these big time D lines. And again, that's why I was so excited to get Justin Scott. You get those big interior guys that he looks like a Jalen Carter. He looks like a guy that could be a top 10 pick, disruptor, 3 technique. Dylan Stewart. Getting the Dylan Stewart, he's got a lot of momentum towards Ohio State. Like that's the eyebrows get raised because that guy is an absolute monster. And then you cap that with Edric Houston, and you have 3 5-stars up front. So when we lose a 4-star to Miami, I think he probably saw the writing on the wall about who's potentially coming here, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go somewhere. Why fight the fight of being the number 3 defensive end when I can go somewhere like the U and be the number 1 defensive end, and also get all of the money that they're not going to have to give to Justin Scott now. So there's a lot of layers to this, but I appreciate the question. That was a fantastic question. What else did that? It's kind of a slow time. These guys are all off right now for 4th of July, or the players are. They'll get back into conditioning on Wednesday after 4th of July festivities. Nevada, where are you at with this class? Again, like we'll break down that 02 class versus this class. Your guy Aaron Nolan's up to 5 stars, so I'm not sure if Justin Zwick or Troy Smith were 5 stars, so that might have the advantage there. We've got great running backs coming. O-line probably about the same. 2 4 stars. I don't know if you count Derek Morris, who might have been a 4-star, 5-star. Running backs, I don't know if you can top Maurice Claret in that 02 class. Receivers, I think it's probably going to this class, the new class. D-line going to this class for sure. Linebackers probably going to the 02 class. Just kind of running this down in my head. But how excited are you about
linebackers, that was Deandra, Kudla, Carpenter, and Hawk. That was that was pretty good group right there. I don't think there's ever been a group quite like that. Again, coming in out of high school, and frankly, 3 of the 4 of them turned out to be great, college players. But back to your thing about Aaron Nolan. Aaron Nolan just got kind of the composite 5-star based upon his high 4-star rankings in all the recruiting services. And I just think Air is a guy that's gonna, he's a gamer, man. He's a guy he's going to be a great college quarterback. And I don't know how well his game is going to translate to the NFL level. And that doesn't mean that I don't believe he can play at the NFL level, but it's just, I'm worried about what you're worried about. What we're worried about as Ohio State fans is how well you're going to play in college football. And I just think as a college football quarterback, man, he has got it all. He's got the look. He's got the speed. He can run. He clearly can pass. He's clearly very proficient in terms of, distributing the ball at the first level and the second level. And I just could not be more excited about that kid. I know we've talked a lot about Aaron Nolan, but boy, him getting a 5-star, 5th star to me was not a surprise. And I know there's kind of a split. Some people don't see him as a 5-star. I absolutely see him as a 5-star college type of player. And I think he's exactly the type of player that Ohio State wants, and exactly the type of player that Ryan Day is, committing to right now, because you look at the type of quarterbacks that he's going for right now, it's kind of changing. People were saying, oh, no, he's just going for drop back quarterbacks. He's just going back for pocket passers. And that's not who we're getting right now. The guys that we're getting, you look at the last 3 quarterback commits, they're all guys that can move. They're all guys that can run. And I don't think that's an accident. I think it's an evolution of what Ryan Day is looking for at the quarterback position. And I think it's a great thing and a very positive thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, like Aaron Nolan, again, I'm not comparing him to Tim Tebow, but I was listening to Travis Kelce's podcast the other day, and I think Travis Kelce's hilarious. I think he's probably the best tight end that's ever lived, or he's top 2. And he talked about how, the Sugar Bowl was the last game ever in college. They played that 09 Florida Gators team that famously got worked by Alabama in the SEC championship, broke their huge winning streak that they had. They were reigning national champions, and that was like the death knell to Urban at Florida. And he was joking about how, everyone's like, yeah, Tim Tebow can't throw and he can't pass. And he's like, he threw for like 500 yards against us and threw it all over us. So, again, like I think people get all obsessed about pro comps and where does he get drafted. And like, I just don't care. Like, if you're an Ohio State fan, if I'm an Ohio State fan, I care about who can move the offense and who can win his Big Ten titles and win his national titles. That's it. Tim Tebow, 2 national titles. Guys that are, Josh Allen, 4 and 8, in college. So, I don't care about what they do in the pros. I care about what they can do. And Eric could easily be that guy. Because like you said, you watched him at the Elite 11. You saw kind of his flaws, and you see some things that Ryan Day and Corey Dennis can correct. Todd Finch, those guys are all good. He's got arm strength. He's a great kid. He's built like an absolute tank. Like I stood next to the kid, and I couldn't believe how put together the kid was. And he doesn't mess around when he's in the gym. I can tell you that for sure. He doesn't remind me of, the only thing that reminds me of Tebow-wise is just physically, you can tell that guy does not joke around, and he takes it seriously because he's a ripped dude. D Sonny, great super chat here. I'm gonna start with you, Nevada. Have you ever seen a player as a freshman and thought they would never play at Ohio State, but then they became great? Any thoughts on that, Nevada? I've got two right off the top of my head, but I'll let you go first.
I'll let you. Well, if you've got two that off the top of your head, I'll let you go so I can think of some better answers than your answers.
All right, so Mike Thomas for sure. Mike Thomas was a kid. He was a freshman in 2012, Urban's first year. They had to send him to Fork Union Military Academy, which is terrible. No cell phones, marching up at 0500, PTN, Full Metal Jacket type stuff. And, he showed up and he was slow. I mean, he was running like a 4.7. He was a slow kid. Bill Greene has talked ad nauseum about how bad he was at the Under Armour All-American game. He thought he was the worst player he'd ever seen in an All-Star game. And so did all the other analysts. He was just it was like a joke that was a favor to Keyshawn to give him in the game. And, when I was with him in 12, like he just wasn't very good. And I remember I begged Tom Herman to take him to the spring game draft just because we only had like 2 scholarship receivers. I'm like, dude, there's actually a scholarship guy on the board. And otherwise, we're starting like 2 walk-ons, or if we go 4 wide. And so I got him to take Mike Thomas. And Mike Thomas had like the greatest spring game ever. He had like 11 catches for like 120 yards. Didn't run a single correct route. It was basically like him and Braxton out there playing street ball. Like they're just like running and getting open, and Braxton would throw him the ball, and it worked. And we won the spring game. And Mike Thomas, but again, Mike had that big year, and then he actually played a little bit as a true freshman, but then he redshirted as a true sophomore. And that never happens, ever. You never see guys take a redshirt the second year. And this is back when the redshirt meant you don't play a single snap the entire year. So it wasn't like you get the 4 games and you can still redshirt. So, and obviously, kid blossoms into national champion, second-round pick, should have been a first-round pick, breaks the NFL receiving record for receptions, absolutely fantastic. And another one was honestly Cardell. Like Cardell, another guy, him and Mike were both at Fork Union together. People forget Braxton Miller and Cardell are the exact same age. They both came in. They were both supposed to come in 2011. Braxton, that was Fickle's year where Braxton was a true freshman. We sent Cardell to military school to get a year separation, and then we redshirted Cardell. So you have 2. He is the same age as Braxton. He had 2 years of separation, just because a lot. This is the 2 quarterback in the class thing didn't really work. There's no portal, so we were trying to give Cardell the best chance to play, but. Cardell got in there. He had the famous tweet, whatever. And then, the dominoes fell where all of a sudden, Braxton's arm falls out of the socket in training camp. And then JT breaks his leg in the Michigan game. And Cardell has the most magical run in Ohio State history, where we win the national championship, beats Alabama in the South. So those were 2 guys that, and God bless them both, because they've turned into phenomenal players, great Ohio State Buckeyes. Very happy to be wrong there, but I know I wasn't alone in the staff room, because we used to have staff meetings. We'd evaluate these guys. So those are my 2 guys. Anyone you have, Nevada?
I think my all-time favorite is Darryl Baldwin. Darryl Baldwin was a kid that just, comes in as a defensive player. Really just there just wasn't a lot there to work with. The early returns from Ohio State were not positive. They were not positive from his teammates. They were not positive from the staff. And I can tell you the fan base was not very optimistic about Darryl. And the fact that he then goes and is the starting right tackle on what's widely regarded as one of the great, at the end of the year, one of the great offensive lines in Ohio State history, and one of that great run where they had, Zeke put up those, back-to-back 240-yard games. Just an amazing performance all the way around. But boy, his career started out as slow as you could possibly get at Ohio State. And like I said, when you see a guy switch positions, it's generally bad. When you see a guy switch sides of the ball, it's really, really bad. And for him to go from that to national champion and key contributor, to me, that's one of the all-time great stories that he'll always stick with me as an example of you never give up on a kid because you just never know.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic example. I mean, Darryl's a guy that Urban literally dealt to me. He dealt me Reed Fraggle, Darryl Baldwin, and I had to turn them both into tackles in 2012. Vrabel had no use for Darryl Baldwin on the D line. After like one day, he's like, yeah, he's coming over to the O line. And the O line, for those of you that are familiar with football, is like the last stop before you're out of the game. Like you can go from linebacker to D line, or tight end to O line. Like O line's like the last stop on the bus, you know. And you get good O line, there ain't nowhere else for us to put you. So I had to turn Darryl into a tackle, and it took a lot of work, a lot of hours. Great kid, not a super nasty, mean kid. Exceptionally strong kid. A kid that just was big, rigid, stiff as a board, but really strong. He's a great kid. He's an engineer now, like really a smart kid, a thoughtful kid. Not nasty at all. But, you know, I talked to guys like Joey Bosa, and Joey said it was harder to go against him than Taylor Decker, which is crazy to me because Taylor ends up being a first-round pick. Darryl, you know, was on a couple of practice squads after his career, but Darryl was just really long-armed, tall, and proof that, you know, sometimes you just gotta blend it all together and work with it. You know, Jacoby Bourne's another guy that's a perfect example. I mean, Jacoby's mom wasn't even sure if he could play at Ohio State. I mean, she asked me, she's like, "You really think my son can play here?" I was like, "Well, yeah, we're not going to just give him a scholarship just to, you know, hold the water." We're like, I mean, we really think the kid can play. And, you know, he's probably the shortest offensive lineman we've ever had. But he's a nasty kid. He's probably the smartest offensive lineman we've ever had. So, you know, his nastiness and his intelligence and his just technique was able to help overcome a lot of physical deficiencies. He's one of the few guys in Ohio State history that's been a multi-year starter that didn't even try out for the NFL draft. I mean, he literally, when he was done after that Notre Dame game in 2015, he dropped like 60 pounds in like 2 months and looked like a whole new dude because he just was like, you know, the NFL's not going to look at me. So he was just like, screw it, I'm going to go work, you know, for my dad. And, you know, the Bourne brothers thing has exploded, and they made a fortune, you know, selling the grass groomers concept. So, hey, I mean, those are a couple of guys that are great examples of guys that, you know, people give up on. Nobody's excited when you get Darryl Baldwin committed, or, you know, he's playing scout team as a third-year guy and that type of thing. But he won a national title, man, as a starting right tackle, and kudos to him because that was all him. I mean, he could have quit, he could have transferred, and he just kept grinding, and he turned into a really nice player. Well,
let me throw out one more before we go, just because, again, I don't think people realize how impossibly bad this player was early on in his career. But Carlos Hyde was so bad, and Urban had absolutely no use for him. You know this. I mean, Urban wanted him gone.
I was there, yeah.
And the fact that he went from Urban wanted him off the team, out of the way, had no vision, had no motivation, wasn't the greatest teammate in the world, to 10+ year NFL player? I mean, like one of the longest tenured Ohio State players at running back that we've ever had, and just a tremendous player. But boy, it didn't start out that way. So he's got to be on the list somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, Carlos was a kid that is very moody, overweight, just a career kind of underachiever. He's one of those guys. I always think about some of the guys I played with that would have been a huge benefit to have Urban Meyer and Mickey Marotti as kind of the battery of head coach, strength coach. And Carlos, I mean, and Stan Drayton had his foot so far up Carlos' butt that you wouldn't even believe it. I mean, Carlos couldn't even breathe because Stan was on him so hard because of Urban. You know, it's like one of those things where it rolls downhill, and Urban, you know, the lava from Urban rolled downhill into Stan, and Stan right into Carlos, and Carlos became a great player. I mean, 2013, he was a first team All-American level type back. You know, and he had that arrest. I mean, he had that arrest in training camp where Urban threw him out of Dodge and kind of got rid of him. And, you know, like he was off the team for a second because he had that like phantom punch on that girl, and the security video came out, and I was like, God, Carlos might be gone. And he came back, and he carried us. So that was probably the best rushing team we've ever had, that 2013 team. At least in recent times, where, you know, we ran for some ridiculous average yards per carry clip because we had Braxton and Carlos, and we had young Ezekiel Elliott as a freshman, and he got some garbage yards. But yeah, Carlos was a guy that, you know, he could have been on the trash heap easily if it wasn't for Urban just turning up the heat on him. And that's a great one because Carlos, again, all the talent in the world, had a great NFL career. I think he's done now, but yeah, he was really good for a bunch of years in the league in San Francisco. Any final thoughts, Nevada? We'll wrap this thing up for everybody. Appreciate you guys tuning in today.
No, just I hate NIL. I've always hated NIL. I hate NIL. I hate it even more today, and I hate it when things don't go the way that they're supposed to, and it puts me in a foul mood. So I'm going to be in a bad mood about NIL for the next 24, 48 hours. So just putting down a notes. I'm a sad panda right now, and the only thing that's going to get me out of this funk is another commitment. So we need some good news to come in for Ohio State, and then we can all be happy again.
All right. Well, we'll be parting for Kingston and Aaron Scott. Well, appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, great show. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for the super chats. Those are outstanding. Great questions. You guys always bring the heat. So thank you guys so much. If you enjoy this content, please leave us a like, click subscribe as we race to 20,000 subscribers. Thank you all so much. We appreciate you. If you enjoy our live content, click that little alert bell. You'll get an alert when we go live. So again, comment. Who is the next recruit we need to get? Who's the most important recruit still on the board for Ohio State? I want to see that down in the comments. Also, shout out where you're from. We had Dubai. We have Dubai. We've had Japan, Dayton, Ohio, Gallipolis, Chesapeake. You know, we're getting it forever. Ironton. So shout out all you guys watching. We appreciate you guys as always. Thank you so much for tuning in. And again, even if you do it one day, keep shouting out where you're from because I love reading where you guys are watching from. So I appreciate you guys so much. If you enjoy this content, BuckeyeScoop.com needs to be your home. Our board is going crazy right now. It's nuts. So nonstop action, just a lot of good Ohio State fans talking ball nonstop. So if you are one of the biggest Ohio State fans in the world, or your friends are, your spouses, your son, daughter, whoever, get them a membership to BuckeyeScoop.com because it is an absolute blast to be on. I'm about to go log on right now and burn the night away on our message board. So I appreciate you guys so much. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much, Buckeye Nation, and thank you, Scoop family. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Go Bucks.